Welcome everyone to the ISGAP Arab Seminar Series. I'm Dalia Ziada, ISGAP DC Coordinator and Research Fellow. And today I'm joined by my dear friend and esteemed guest, Hussain Abdul Hussain. I will say more about him in a minute, but let me first introduce you to our seminar. And before I start, I also want to tell you we already have a translation for those of you who speak in Arabic. The main conversation will happen in English. I know so many Arab audience has already signed up for our program. So please click the language icon in your Zoom window in order to be able to listen to the interpretation in Arabic. So once again, welcome to the Arab version of the bilingual seminar series organized by ISGAP, the Institute for Global Anti-Semitism and Policy. Our series will be titled Barriers to Neo-Regionalism in the Middle East. Over 12 sessions, starting today, we will examine the historical, ideological, and institutional barriers that have repeatedly prevented the Middle East from achieving sustainable peace and security. Today's session focuses on one of these dilemmas, perhaps the biggest, which is Pan-Arabism, an ideology that swept our region, the Middle East, in the mid-20th century, subordinating state interests to abstract notions of unity. Instead of unifying the region, Pan-Arabism has become a barrier to functional cooperation and peace. Even worse, Pan-Arabism today in the 21st century is still conflicting with the nationalist interests, visions, and goals of individual Arab states. How did we get here and how to break free from this situation? To help us unpack this paradox, we are joined by an exceptional guest, Hussain Abdul Hussain. Hussain is a senior research fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Many of you may know him from his incisive commentary on X, Twitter, and his frequent media appearances, including in Arabic-speaking media. Hussain is widely respected for his analysis of Middle Eastern politics, particularly the Gulf, Iran, and Israel. His personal trajectory is the most interesting part here, actually. Having been born and raised in Beirut, Baghdad, and Baalbek, those of you who are from the region or familiar of the region or know about the regions, they will know that these three cities in particular have been theaters for the region's most defining conflicts over the years. This places him actually at the intersection of the very political and ideological forces we are examining today. Welcome, Hussain. We're so happy to have you with us.
Good morning, Dalia. Thanks for having me on. Real honor to be on the first session of your seminar.
Thank you. Thank you. The honor is all ours, definitely. So let's start by clarifying for our audience what we exactly mean by terms like, al-Qawmiyya al-Arabiyya, Arab nationalism, versus state nationalism, al-Wataniyya, mafhum, or the concept of Wataniyya, and why they are in conflict with each other, why they are not complementing each other.
Well, that's a great question. This started toward the last century of the Ottoman Empire, when all these countries today, many of them are member states of the Arab League, when they were provinces of the Ottoman Empire, and they did not have this exact shape that they have now. As the Ottoman Empire was weakening, and as the ideas of the nation states started spreading among the Arabs, these Arabs started debating what should happen next. If all these nations are getting their independence and their self-determination, so what are the Arabs were going to do about it? And you had a split at the time, and this split was mainly between whether they should stay as part of the Ottoman Empire, whether they should re-establish the Khilafah, which is the pan-Islamic, like all of them will be part of the of the pan-Islamic leadership, or whether they should behave as Arabs, since they are all Arabic speakers, they're not Turks. So whether they should establish this great big one big nation from the Gulf to the ocean, from the Gulf to the Atlantic Ocean, that is, and which we call today the Arab world, and many of its states are members of the Arab League. So these were the ideas. Now, the ideas of specific local nationalism
Mm.
emerged eventually. It was not part of the debate, but when the British and the French started dividing this region, or drawing the borders, or redrawing the borders. These, like I said, these are provinces. But when they started redrawing the borders, they drew them in ways that best fit their interest. For example, the oil pipelines that had to pass from Iraq to the Mediterranean, these influenced how the borders were drawn. The Suez Canal between the British and the French, this also influenced how they should be. And they, of course, they took into consideration local sensitivities. So this specific tribe got that part. So this is how it started. But eventually, when these countries got names, Iraq, Algeria, Lebanon, they started having their own national identity, and they started reviving pre-Islamic identity, because if the Islamic identity is common, but if you want something more specific, you go back in time before Islam had spread throughout the region, and this is how you get Mesopotamia, or this is how you get the Pharaonic Egypt, or this is how you get the Phoenicians. Now, so that I don't go into more details, I'll just suffice to say that when Sykes-Picot and the Europeans drew the borders, the majority of the Sunni Muslims who were Arabic speakers at the time opposed these borders. And they wanted either a pan-Arab kingdom in the Levant under the Hashemite leadership of King Faisal, who went to Damascus and proclaimed his kingdom, or they wanted a khilafah that also encompasses everyone. The only groups that really endorsed the states, I'm sorry, the states as they were drawn by the Europeans were the minorities. So in Lebanon, the Christians were the ones who loved the idea of Lebanon, because Lebanon was majority Christian. So they thought, we've been living with the Muslims all these years, and we have been second degree citizens. So now if we get our own country, then one of us can become president, because as you know, Muslims cannot become presidents of Muslim countries. This is in religion. So they thought, okay, maybe if we get our countries, we'll get ourselves as presidents. The countries will take Sunday off instead of Friday. The countries will celebrate Easter or Hanukkah, or so you got the Jews were the ones who loved the idea of Palestine. Palestine was a Jewish country as drawn by the British. Christians were the ones who loved the idea of Iraq. And Syria was drawn into four countries. You had the Druze mountain, you had the Alawite mountain, you had the Druze state, the Alawite state, and all these guys loved the new states that they got, because this was the first time in their lives that they were sovereign. And whereas the Muslims, especially the Sunnis of Lebanon and the Sunnis in Palestine, they are the ones who opposed these independent entities. They opposed independent Lebanon. They thought Lebanon should be part of the bigger Arab world. In Palestine, by the way, the Muslims of Palestine never called themselves Palestinian, if you check out the history, until 1964. But before then, they thought that this is an abomination. Palestine is not a country. The Palestinians are part of the bigger Pan-Arabism, or bigger Islamic Caliphate. And by the way, the most famous of the Palestinian, or the Arabs who fought in Palestine at the time, is Azz-ad-Din al-Qassam. And Azz-ad-Din al-Qassam was a Syrian, a guy from Syria. And Fawzi al-Qawuqji, who also fought in Palestine, he was also a Syrian. So the guys who were fighting were from the neighboring Arab countries. So just this is to explain the difference between nationalism and the Pan-Arabism and the Islamic Khilafah of the Sunni Islam. So this is how it started. Now, eventually, it started taking different shapes. And when Abdul
Mm.
Nasser rose to power and he wanted to become the president of everyone, his rivals, including Saudi Arabia, started propping up nationalism to counter his Pan-Arabism. So Arafat was propped up by Saudi Arabia to counter Nasser, and Arafat beat Nasser's guy. Nasser's guy, the guy who founded the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, was Ahmad al-Shuqairi in 1964, and he was the guy of Gamal Abdel Nasser. But to counter him, Saudi Arabia propped up Arafat and sponsored Arafat, and Arafat beat al-Shuqairi in election in 1968 and took his place, and he switched the rhetoric of Palestinians from being a pan-Arab population to he started promoting that Palestine, we Palestinians, they started calling themselves Palestinians. They started saying Palestine was a country taken from us by the Jews and transformed into Israel, even though, as I said, Palestine, the Jews were the ones who were supporting the idea of Palestine at first, you know? So all this history was rewritten in such a way that, you know, almost now you can't even tell the difference between what used to be nationalism or Pan-Arabism at the time.
That's very interesting, Hussein, actually, because also you highlighted very clearly that Pan-Arabism did not only start with Gamal Abdel Nasser, as most of us think. It actually existed before. He only kind of capitalized on the existing sense of or desire to go back to the caliphate system by the Sunni majority in the region and used it to his advantage. But also, one item that should be like explained here is the position of Israel, the birth of the Israeli state, and how it kind of motivated this new iteration of Pan-Arabism under Gamal Abdel Nasser to take a different form, to be not only mainly about unifying people around one culture or one ideology or one, let's say, a political or geopolitical umbrella, but unfortunately, it became unifying them around hatred towards a certain people. How can we understand Israel in this context, its role, the birth of Israel in this part, as you said, Palestine, which I mean, a cause for a lot of trouble worldwide today. As a name, I mean, the Free Palestine movement worldwide, as we can see, claims that this land belonged to the Arab Palestinians, not to the Jewish people, as you just mentioned. How can we respond to that and once again explain Pan-Arabism in contrast to the birth of the state of Israel or the rejection of the state of Israel in mid 20th century?
So look, like I said, the original split, and we're talking starting the 1800, 1850, 1860, Jamal ad-Din Afghani, Muhammad Abdul, these guys who are believed to have started what they call the Arab Renaissance at the time. When the debate started, it is really ironic that it was the non-Muslim minorities, especially the Christians of the Levant, who advocated for Arab nationalism. The reason they did that was that they believed that secularism was in their favor. If you are, you know, a Christian in a sea of Muslims, you're a minority. If you are in secular and you're Arab like everybody else, you stop being a minority. You get equal rights like everybody else. You can run for president. You can, you know, become the leader of the ummah, whatever it is. So at first, it was these minorities who supported the idea of secular Pan-Arabism, as opposed to, you know, the pan-Muslim nation. And by the way, this lasted because if you check out the names of the biggest names of the intellectuals who maybe calling them intellectuals is not the best choice of words, but you know, the people who, the ideologues, the charlatans who wrote the literature of Arab nationalism, they're mostly Christian. The
Yes.
founder of Hizb al-Ba'ath al-Arabi al-Ishtiraki, the Ba'ath party, was Michel Aflaq, who's a Greek Orthodox from Syria. And with him, the Zaki al-Arsuzi was Alawite, a non-Sunni Muslim. Constantin Zrei, you know, the father of pan-Arab nationalism in Lebanon and Syria. Constantin Zrei was also a Greek Orthodox from Christian from Damascus. So you see that at first these guys thought that Pan-Arabism is a good way to override these borders as drawn by the colonials, by Britain and France, and at the same time not have it Islamic, for them to get something. Now, even those, by the way, if you look up the literature of Zaki of Michel Aflaq and of Constantin Izre, you will see that they eventually merge into Islamism. They couldn't find, when they came together and tried to come up with an idea. We speak Arabic, all of us. Great. What are we? Are we an ethnicity? Because we're clearly not. There are black Arabs, there are white Arabs, there are, all sorts of ethnically mixed Arabs. Are we a nation from old times? No. Are we? So when they started trying to come up with something that would bring the Arabs together, the only thing they could find at the time was Prophet Muhammad and the beginning of Islam. And both of them, Michel Aflaq and Constantin Izre, endorsed him. And they said this was a great Arab leader. We don't have to go into his religion, but what he did was that he spread Arabism across the world. And this story, we endorse the story of Prophet Muhammad as a secular story. So even the secular Pan-Arabs couldn't get away, couldn't find a story to build for Pan-Arabism. And this is what made it much weaker when compared to the Pharaohic history or the Mesopotamian history. Because Mesopotamian history, you have kings with archaeology and coins and names and dates and thousands of years and a specific national identity that eventually the Iraqis revived, not revived, but they used as part of building what Iraq became eventually under Saddam. And the same thing with the Egyptians. The Egyptians had, their own history. Now, if you look closely, by the way, the official names of the two countries, the only two Arab countries who merged into unity, by the way, I'm sure you know who they are, Egypt and Syria. If you look into their names, you'll find it really interesting because the Syrians put the word Arab before the name of their republic. So, Al-Jumhuriyya Al-Arabiyya Suriya, the Arab Syrian Republic. Whereas in Egypt, Jumhuriyat Masr Al-Arabiyya. So Egypt, the Republic of Egypt, that's Arab, roughly. That's how it translates. So you see that the Egyptians are proud of their history and put Arab after their own national identity. Whereas the Ba'athist party in Syria insisted that Arab comes first because we're all Arabs. And Syria is only a province of this big Arab world. So the Arab Syrian Republic. So the dynamic is really interesting. What eventually ended up happening, and just to go back to Palestine, because you asked me about this, Abdul Nasser wanted everyone to become part of one state, of one Pan-Arab state. But this one Pan-Arab state would have been under him, under his autocracy. He wanted one autocracy. He was not thinking of one nation where everyone is equal and where we spread liberty and equality and freedom and the rule of law. And no, that was not his idea. His idea was that if we come together, we become strong. Now, and this is where the Israel issue comes in. And you see this until today because this is happening as we speak. Saudi Arabia has just shifted from wanting normalization with Israel to being the biggest basher of Israel and the United States. But the reason this happens is that when you rally people around you and you say we are a great nation, but then these people look inside and see domestic failure in terms of economy, in terms of unemployment, in terms of you name it, failing infrastructure, you have to deflect their attention one way or another. And the best way to deflect the attention of people is to invent an enemy, and preferably a foreign enemy. And you direct all this anger against this foreign enemy. And of course, Israel was there because the hatred, anti-Semitism, the hatred against the Jews is as old as Islam itself. I don't have to go into the text and the history and how the Prophet kicked out the 3 Jewish tribes in Medina. We all know these stories. But in the text, in Islam, there are a lot of parts in Islam that hate the Jews, and there are a lot of parts that love the Jews. So, like I always say, religion is what you make of it. It's the way you interpret it. It's the verses that you choose. It's the mindset that you pick. So Islam has both. but it's much easier for anyone to hate the other. So, if you're Christian, it's easy for you to hate the Jews or the Muslims. If you're Muslim, it's easy for you to hate the others. So Abdul Nasser channeled all this failure and anger into Israel. I wouldn't say he was agitating against the Jews at the time because he perceived of himself as being secular, but still, he wanted Israel to go. So Abdel Nasser wanted Israel to disappear. And in his most famous speech at the UN, he said that the best solution was to wind back the arms of the clock to the time when before Israel existed. This was his idea, just we go back to 1947, Israel doesn't exist, and then Palestine becomes an independent Arab nation.
Right. Uh, great explanation, Hussein, actually. And actually, this brings us to the question is that we saw very clearly that the Pan-Arabism project has failed at one point in history, especially in the 1970s and so, or let's say specifically after the 1967 war with Israel, when Arabs led by Egypt at that time and Syria just found out that there is no way to uh, get rid of Israel. Let's find ways to cooperate with Israel and have peace with Israel. But what happened is that, unfortunately, despite the peace treaties that were signed, for example, the one between Egypt and Israel in the 1970s, they continued on the public level to promote Pan-Arabist values, anti-Semitic values also against the Jews and against Israel in a way that made us today, the people in the region, still haunted by this narrative and still kind of imprisoned in this narrative and unable to get out of it. How to break free from this situation, how to uh, convince our people that this Arabism narrative, this Arab nationalism thing, this Arab unity, or even to your point, Islamic unity. I mean, you made it so clearly and so beautifully that we're kind of under, or let's say, the Arab Islamist conquest or colonialism has overpowered all the other forms of colonialism in the region already. So, how to bring people back to their original identities and make them just focus on their national interests, especially that we saw glimpses of that over history, either during the Abraham Accords era or during the peace treaties era in the late 1970s and early 1980s, and why they failed or not failed, why they were not sustainable. And these peace initiatives, I mean, versus the deeply rooted ideology of Arabist Islamist values that unfortunately, political values, I'm speaking, not the religious values, that unfortunately are just taking us to the dark ages once again.
So, yes, let me start by telling you an anecdote from my days in college. When, back in the time, I was very supportive of secular Pan-Arabism. And a friend of mine, the two of us, he was carrying a Palestinian flag. And my history professor, very smart guy, experienced, he looked at him and he said, "Why don't you hold the Lebanese flag?" And then my friend answered that Lebanon does not exist. It was invented by the colonialists. This is the idea that all the most of the Muslims in Lebanon endorsed for a long time. That Lebanon was made by France. It's not a real country. It should merge into union with Syria and Egypt and become part of the Arab world. And if you know that the Lebanese civil war was mainly over this, when they went to sign the end of the civil war in Ta'if in Saudi Arabia, the main clause that the Muslim side insisted on was to amend the constitution because until 1990, the constitution of Lebanon said Lebanon is a country with an Arab face, in Arabic, Lubnan balad wajh Arabi. In Ta'if, they dropped the face. They made it Lubnan balad Arabi. And this was upon request from the Muslim side. So back to my friend, he said this is, Lebanon is not real. Lebanon is fake. It was made by the colonials. To which answer, my history professor said, And Palestine is real and not made by the colonials. And because this is these were the same colonials who drew the borders of Lebanon, also drew the borders of Palestine. So if you think that Lebanon is any more fake than Palestine, no, they're either both fake or they both real, but you can't really pick one or the other. So this is just to explain to you that the switch back and forth when you talk to Islamists or to Pan-Arabists, the switch back and forth is really amazing because they don't notice, they commit so many contradictions and they don't notice. Now, to the part where uh, Pan-Arabism became so infested with anti-Semitism, and of course Pan-Islamism too. And like I said, by the way, the difference between the two is really a thin line that you can barely see. So you can use them interchangeably. Until this moment, the Arabs cannot tell what's the difference between them being Arabs and Muslim, and they use them interchangeably. And oblivious to the idea that you have millions of Egyptians who are not Muslim, or millions of Lebanese who are not Muslim. But in the majority thinking, everyone who speaks Arabic is Muslim. So I'll quote here a good friend of mine and of yours, Dalia, and he's Egyptian American, Hussain Abu Bakr Mansour. Great intellectual, and he talks about this in detail. When Arab nationalism was building itself, when all of this anti-Israel and let's build an Arab nation, they were building themselves. They imported nationalism in its European version. And the European version of nationalism is that the nation is one and behaves as one organic being. And what's good for the nation is good for everyone who's part of the nation. So as long as your nation is winning, if you are Russia and you're winning over Ukraine, we're all winning. Even if you're someone who's broke, penniless, unemployed, sick, you name it, they convince you that what works for the nation works for you. When you compare European nationalism to American nationalism, which we don't call nationalism, we call mainly patriotism, over here we're different. Over here, liberty comes first. We are a nation built on liberty. We come together as a nation because each one of us is a proud individual of their own personal rights. This is what America is. This is what brings us together. And this is very different from the nationalism that you see in Europe. So when the Arabs imported nationalism, they imported the European version. And they constructed their nationalism the same way that the Europeans had constructed their fascist, Nazi, all kinds of racist nationalism. Arab nationalism is supremacy. And Pan-Islamism is also supremacy. You think of your nation as a supreme nation that should be restored to its past glory, but you never think of, okay, fine, we restore to the past glory, but all these people are in jail, or they don't have liberty, or they don't have rights, or they don't have food to put on the table. So this is the huge difference, and this goes with us until today. And I tell you this as someone who grew up in Lebanon, and I always question this with cousins and family and friends. We grew up as Shia in Lebanon, and as some of you know, Hezbollah is Shia, and Hezbollah became the most powerful military power in Lebanon, more powerful than the state. So the Shia dominated. Now the question is, when you go talk to a Shia, a friend, a relative, anyone, and you say you're unemployed, you can't find a job. I mean, the country is miserable. There's no electricity, there's no water, there's no employment, and you still support Hezbollah, as if you were, they rely on you. So in their minds, this makes up to their failure. The mere reason that he's a complete failure is compensated when he thinks, oh, we the Shia, we beat everyone. We beat the Sunnis, we beat the Christians, we're stronger than the state. We beat the Sunnis in Syria. We fought Israel to a standstill in 2006. So this is where it comes from. And by the way, Hezbollah hides its anti-Semitism behind the Lebanese dynamics. So if and let me say this, I'm not sure whether our audience is aware of this or not. There's not a single Shia Palestinian. All Palestinians are either Sunni or Christian or something else, but there are no Shia. There's not a single holy spot for the Shia in all of Palestine. The holy Shia, the sacred and holy Shia cities are Mecca and Medina. This is for all Muslims. And then if you're Shia, after Mecca and Medina comes Najaf, where Imam Ali is buried, and after it comes Karbala in South Iraq, the two cities. Jerusalem would probably be number 15, even 20. So the Shia have nothing to do with Jerusalem or with the Palestinian issue. So if Hezbollah tries to drag the Shia of Lebanon to war with Israel, they will not be as happy. I mean, unless, Hezbollah convinces the Lebanese that we're defending ourselves, the Jews are coming after us. Okay, this is different. Self-defense is different. But the Shia of Lebanon are not really big on liberating Palestine and taking back Jerusalem. The reason they support Hezbollah and the reason that they want Hezbollah to continue to be armed is that they want to feel stronger than the Sunnis and the Christians of Lebanon itself or of Syria, but nothing, for the Palestinians themselves. So I'm trying here to explain the sub-identities underneath the nationalism. So now back to why are all these people anti-Semitic? And this is the last thing I say as someone who grew up in Lebanon. If you live in Lebanon, there are three authors that you can read if you want to learn about Israel. Number one is Chomsky, Noam Chomsky. Number two is Norman Finkelstein, and number three is Edward Said. This is all you need to know. If you're Lebanese, this is how you learn about Israel. So now you can imagine, how all these lies about the Jews pulling the strings all over the world, controlling Hollywood and controlling the financial sector and the banks and the armies and controlling America and puppeteering Trump and puppeteering Biden. All of these lies make sense to someone who's only read Finkelstein and Chomsky. Unless these people start having exposure, and this is where the law of boycotting Israel is really important to Hezbollah, because they build a wall. If you can't talk to Israelis, you can't humanize Israelis, if you can't read the literature of Israelis, then you will think that what Finkelstein and Chomsky are saying, and of course the two of them being Jews, you will think that they're right. You will think that the Jews are really mastering the world and they're a threat, they're a menace to the world, and the best way to fix the world is to get rid of them.
Amazing, amazing, Hussein. So actually, what you mentioned right now is very also interesting, given the dynamic we are seeing in the region currently. We are seeing kind of the Shia camp in the region is being weakened, either first by Israel targeting the Shia militia affiliated to Iran in certain Arab countries around Israel, or later targeting Iran itself. And today we are seeing, with all the protests happening inside Iran, there is big hopes actually that we will get rid of this Shia axis, which in contrast made the Sunni axis in the region rise up once again and desire to take advantage of the situation and dominate. But unfortunately, as you have written in many of your articles and tweets and even several comments you made in the media, we are in a very dangerous situation right now, because some of the countries, especially in the Gulf, who are the main countries that are kind of the big sisters of the region right now, there is some kind of negative disagreement between them. Negative, I mean, it would lead to negative consequences, because they are fighting over something which is the Sunni leadership of the region, in a way that is unfortunately making countries like Saudi Arabia today, after it has, for example, been more focused on its national interests in the past 5 to 7 years or so, having a vision 2030, 2050, and so planning for the good of the Saudi people. Now, all of a sudden, they put this aside and they are putting their hands with very dangerous Sunni groups, including even terrorist groups in the region, in hope that this will give them this advantage, having bringing the region back to the Sunni camp or bringing back the Arab Islamist imperialism or empire back to dominate the region over the Iranian Shia camp that has been dominating for a while. It's a very sad scene, especially also, I would say, but I don't mean with it any political biases or anything, that the only country in the Gulf, the United Arab Emirates, that has been able to really drive the region toward this light, toward this future, toward this peace with Israel, towards focusing even on national interests versus the narrative of Pan-Arabism that has destroyed the region for so long, is now being fought against by these other Arab countries, which it's hard to understand. How can we explain that? How can we understand this? And what are we heading into as a region? And within this question, I also want to focus on what is the position of the minority, ethnic minorities, and also religious minorities, which I believe they are in huge danger right now as the Sunni camp is on the rise. So, where are we heading?
Well, that's a great question. Let me start by saying that I've been doing this for some time, and I lived firsthand what happened in Iraq. I was an advocate of toppling Saddam, being myself, my dad being from Iraq and having spent some time growing up in Iraq. Um, I supported the war. I supported toppling Saddam, and I lived every moment of it. And I probably learned some lessons from what happened. What America did after 9/11 is that it knocked out the two biggest Sunni regimes, one to the east of Iran, the Taliban in Afghanistan, and one to the west of Iran, Saddam Hussein in Iraq. The weakening of these two regimes allowed Iran to grow unchecked, and Iran started taking over Iraq. It already had Lebanon. It expanded into Yemen. It tried to take over Bahrain. So Iran really started expanding. Now, this is the mistake that the Obama administration made. They believed that, and to an extent, the Bush administration, the last year of the Bush administration, this is when it started. So just to be clear, I'm not talking partisanship here. I'm just saying this was a Washington mistake from both parties. Starting 2007, the Bush administration started thinking that the Shia Islamism, which is a copy of Sunni Islamism, but only Shia, that Shia Islamism is reasonable, that we can reason with them and bring Iran back into the fold and share, and everybody in the region would share. And this started with Bush in 2007. By the time Obama came into office, he tried to make even nicer, be nicer to the Iranians, with the hope that if we concede and give them what they want, they will change their behavior. So change of behavior is the phrase that we used for Iran, hoping that after we knock down these Sunni Islamists and Iran is raising, if Iran changes its behavior, why not? They can be dominant in Iraq and other places, if they play game like everybody else. Now, this clearly failed. At the time, I was someone who was against this, and I said, these regimes can never change. This is who they are. If they change, they die. They become someone else. There's no change. So now we know they never changed, and this led up to October 7, and this forced Israel to crush the Shia Islamism Iranian axis to a big extent, weaken it as much as possible. And as a consequence, Assad collapsed. Assad being an ally and asset of Iran in Syria. Assad collapsed. And now the Sunnis found it a great opportunity to come back. And I think what is happening now is that we are repeating the Iraq mistake by thinking that we can reason with Sunni Islamists who are jihadists like Ahmad Shara. And of course, most of this is being sponsored and bought by all the billions that Qatar makes available to everyone. So Qatar is promising everyone this will become heaven, We will invest in Syria, we'll spend on Syria. I don't think it'll work. Shara is a jihadi Islamist. Uh, and just a disclaimer, when he first came to power, I said, and he said he had changed at the time, if you remember. He said he started wearing a suit. He said, "My history is my history. I'm a different person now." And I was one of the few people who said, "Look, if you say you've changed, I'll believe you, but show us." And I came under a lot of heat at the time for saying, "What are you doing? Do you think this Al Qaeda guy would change?" I said, "We have to take his word for it." And of course, he proved me wrong, after just a few weeks. So now the point here is that we have jihadi Sunni Islam, the type of Al Qaeda, coming back. And this time we're not looking at them the same way we were looking at them after 9/11. This time, for some reason that's beyond me, we look at them and we think they're reasonable. Farah is reasonable. He has a tie. We can spray perfume on him, and his Al Qaeda stench will go away or something. I think this is a huge mistake. Now, this said, let me just say something about Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a country that I've been cheering for since this king came to power in 2015. And with him, his son MBS, the crown prince, who's the de facto ruler of the kingdom today. And he promised reform, and he did things that no Saudi had done before him. Pulled the country toward moderation, allowed women to drive, allowed them to get rights, and talked about normalization. And he seemed to me as someone who had a plan to transform Saudi Arabia from a country that relies on oil income to a country that seeks to become a services and knowledge economy like Israel and the UAE and other countries around the world. And this really resonated with me. And over the past, at least decade, I've been cheering for this. I've been supporting it. Even when the Saudi officials say not so nice statements, anti-Semitic statements, I always try to give them the benefit of the doubt. I think this has changed now, starting a few weeks ago. And the reason this has changed is mainly economic, to my mind. For Saudi Arabia to break even, it has to sell the barrel of oil at $95. Over the past year, Saudi Arabia sold its barrel of oil at $65. That's 1/3 of losses. Saudi deficit in 2025 was $65 billion. This is not sustainable. If you keep on selling oil and feeding your people to keep them happy, this cannot be sustained. If this is not sustainable, the economy will be in trouble. The Saudi economy will be in trouble. It will shake the very social contract between the ruling Saudi family and the Saudis, because this is built on them providing for the Saudis. So, like we said, what do you do when your economy is in trouble? You go back to bashing, the Jews and Zionism and the United States and the UAE, everybody else. Now, this is one thing. Another thing is that Saudi Arabia has suppressed Islamism and Al-Qaeda at least since 9/11. So after 9/11, the Saudis have been seriously suppressing all these radical jihadi impulses within their population, reversing what they did throughout the 1990s, which was great. But since then, the Saudis have been watching Qatar and Turkey. And Qatar and Turkey are two countries that are doubling down on jihadi Islamism as a tool of projecting power beyond their borders. So now the Saudis are looking and thinking, why not do what the Turks and the Qataris are doing? Because Islamism, jihadi Islamism, is their best tool to spread their influence, to project their influence beyond their borders, whether in Yemen or in Sudan or in Saudi Arabia or anywhere with a bunch of Muslims. This is a great tool for them. So now you see the Saudis copying the Qatari model instead of copying the UAE model, which didn't work for them. They couldn't copy it. Now they're copying the Qatari model. The Qatari model is that you speak from both sides of your mouth. In Arabic, you say, let's liberate Palestine. In English, you say peace and two-state solution. And now this has been happening over the past few weeks, and I've been calling out the Saudis for it, and they've become really angry with me over it. Accusing me of bias and partiality and being paid by the UAE Of course, this is after a decade of being by Israel. No, but look, this is how you and I know, this is how the region debates things. This is how they argue. It's always ad hominem. They never they never debate what you're saying. They debate you. So this is my fear, and I say this here. I think the United States is going down the wrong way of thinking that we can reason with Sharia and the Islamists and Turkey and Qatar. If we think that Turkey should get its troops in Gaza or inside of Syria, like it's doing now. But by the way, Sharia is not really his own guy, he's Turkey's guy, and Turkey is taking over Syria. If we think that Turkish troops should be on Israel's northern border and in Gaza, and that this is reasonable, I have a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn. So I'm very skeptical. I've been ringing the alarm over the past few weeks, trying kind of to break the glass and say Saudi Arabia is going in the Islamism direction. We have to do something. Tom Barrack has to be pulled out of Syria. We need a different policy. And since you mentioned it, Dalia, since you mentioned it, we saw what he did to the Alawites. We saw how he massacred the Druze. As I speak now, there are 31 Druze villages that are still burnt down and empty, and their people displaced. The Kurds, it's unfolding as I speak now. They went after the Kurds. They liberated all the ISIS prisoners who are now back into the population, the global population, if I may say. So I think this is bad, and just to understand how much we, America, do not trust Sharia. CENTCOM decided to move whatever remained of the ISIS prisoners to Iraq. So we're not even handing them over to Sharia, even though we invited Sharia over here to Washington, rolled out the red carpet, and celebrated his joining the coalition against ISIS. We don't believe that. We say it out loud, but CENTCOM doesn't believe that he is a good partner against ISIS. So why are we giving him Syria? And by the way, once he's done with Syria, he'll go after Lebanon. Mark my words. Yeah, yeah, and this is why the Shia of Lebanon and Hezbollah are insisting that they keep their arms, because they're thinking that the Sunnis are coming for a rematch from the Syrian civil war. And once he's done with Syria and Lebanon, where would he go? You tell me the answer.
Oh
Israel,
yeah,
of course.
we know. Yeah, exactly. It's a plan, and unfortunately, um, nobody is stopping them. And sadly, also the minorities, to your point, Hussein, are the ones who are going to pay the biggest price for that. So my last question to you, before maybe we take a question or two from the audience, is that uh, do you still, given everything we spoke about today, do you still believes that peace and stability and real cooperation and real sense of regionalism, where everyone in the region, regardless of their backgrounds, regardless of their history, regardless of their religion or so, will be able to cooperate together for the good of this very important region in the world, very wealthy region? Is it going to happen one day, or we just need to forget about peace for a while and maybe suggest another alternative, another frame for this neo regionalism that we want to achieve?
Look, I think what you mentioned, whether it'll happen, I think it exists, but it unfortunately exists in pockets. So if you go to Dubai, exactly what you said now exists. They live in peace, they trade. There are Israelis who live and raise their families in Dubai. There are Emirati students who study in Israeli universities. Bilateral trade has, grown multifold between them. Technology cooperation, finance, you name it. And this is how it should be. And the same applies to Morocco. Just signed a arms deal worth, so many billions, and technology cooperation. And this applies to Bahrain. So you have these three Abraham Accord countries. They're doing brilliant. Their economies are doing good. They're moving in the right direction. They are peaceful. Israel is, happy with this arrangement, and Israel is growing happily as a tech hub and an asset in the region for Arab countries themselves, by the way. So if this model is expanded and is applied in Saudi Arabia, And in Egypt and Jordan, by the way, even though they have peace treaties, but they're not their peace is different from the Abraham Accords peace. Theirs is more of a ceasefire truce kind of agreement. The governments talk behind closed doors, but then the population goes in a different direction. That's a different story. But what I'm saying is that we have a peaceful model where everyone is happy raising their kids, growing their economy, and living happily. And this should be applied everywhere in Iraq, in Saudi Arabia, in Lebanon, in Syria. As someone who's from Lebanon and who still has a voice in Lebanon. I say this all the time in Lebanon on Lebanese TV media in Arabic. I write it in my columns to the Lebanese. I'm the guy who is calling for immediate and unconditional peace between Lebanon and Israel. So if we expand this model, and this is where my bias comes in for these countries, for the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco. Uh, if we apply their model, I think we'll be in a better shape. The region will be in a better shape. But if we go back to the Turkey, Qatar, and now Saudi Arabia joining the model, I think we're in for trouble. Now, which model prevails, I really can't say. But if you look at Syria, I think the jihadi Al-Qaeda Islamist camp is the one that's on the ascendance. If the other camp was on the ascendance, the Kurds would have at least stayed there. The Druze maybe would have been in a better shape. So it's this is still unfolding, and the jury is still out. My sense, my gut feeling is that it's not going the way we want it to go. It's going in the Islamist way, and I hope I'm wrong.
Very sadly, actually, but thank you so much, Hussein. I learned a lot from you today, and I'm sure our audience also learned a lot from you. And you gave us a new perspective that is we cannot usually access in media or even text box about the Middle East. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. Before I conclude with you, is there any questions in Noah and my colleagues who are moderating the questions in the background? Would you please leave any questions you have from the audience in the chat box? Okay, I can't see any, so or maybe until they send something, let's conclude by this question, which is mainly about you and your daily routine, Hussein. Like on day to day, where do you get your news from? How do you read the news? What is your routine in understanding the region? So maybe you can give some tips to our audience on how to approach the news, given all the noise we are having from all different sides. Everyone wants to prove their point. The polarization is so extreme, as you know, either here in the US or even in the Middle East. So, what's your routine? What is your habit of exploring the news? What do you do exactly every morning?
Well, I'm lucky because I have access to literature in the three languages, in English, Arabic, and Hebrew. And what I do is that I read what these people say. Number one, I go to their editorials, and more so in Arab countries because, as you know, most Arab countries editorials are usually the government position. So I keep monitoring the media. I have Al Jazeera, unfortunately, running in the background 24/7, which gives me a headache, but yeah, this is something I keep an eye on. I also watch, I don't want to be, giving any publicity here, but Channel 12 is also in the background. So I'm keeping an eye on the debate on the Israeli side. And because these news sometimes tend to repeat themselves, I dig into the channels on Telegram and X and see what the accounts that are known, what they're saying and what they're thinking. And lo and behold, by the way, even though this seems to be like a lot of information and a lot of sources, lo and behold, once you spot
Yeah.
a few talking points, you will find them across, whether it's an editorial or X account or Telegram chat, whatever it is. And this is how
Yeah.
you start. It's like rain, it starts one drop, two drops, three drops. And here I'm talking about how I observed Saudi Arabia changing its policy. It started one, two, three drops official statements, then X account, and then it started raining. And now it's all across their media and social media. So you keep on following and observing, and the Syria they have Shara has a satellite channel. He has the Sana, the Syrian news agency from Assad times. He's revived it. He has a few supporters on X, even here in Washington, who parrot the position and the talking points of Shara and Qatar and Turkey. So once you're aware of what everyone is saying, you just have
Mm.
to put two and two together.
Amazing. So we got a few questions here, but actually I will compress them in two. So one is about US policy, and it's mainly about how the US will proceed given what you have outlined. Like what would you advise the US administration to do next, given this sad picture we just explained to the audience right now, and what direction Trump is taking Arab world, since he looks like he is empowering Islamism, and is that true? First of all, is this claim true? And like, what should we do? What the U.S. administration should do?
Uh, Look, I think if we want to be part of this, we cannot pick and choose when we want to be part and when we don't. I
Mm,
think the biggest problem for the US policy around the world, but especially in the Middle East, is inconsistency. We're inconsistent. We're either invading Iraq or striking the Iranian nuclear facility, which is a huge commitment and intervention, or we're just pulling out of Syria and let the Kurds figure out for themselves how to be beaten by Shara.
mm,
So we have, I think, what happened with the Kurds yesterday was a, a huge problem for the reputation of the United States. You and I, Dalia, talk to Arab parties and leaders and tribes all the time. One of the biggest problems that all these tribes have is reliability. The United States is not a reliable partner. The United States might throw you under the bus at any moment. Now, of course, the Arabs who are listening to me now know that the most common talking point among the Arabic speakers is that Israel exists and Israel is strong because of America. That Israel completely relies on America. That if America disappears somehow, Israel is nothing. This is complete nonsense because we know that from time to time, the United States does throw Israel under the bus, and this is Israel, its closest ally. In the history of Israel, you never see an Israeli person burning an American flag or writing a statement that's bad about America. This is Israel is as best as any ally on the face of the planet the United States can get. Loyal, intelligence sharing. We asked them to stop talking to the Chinese or cooperate. They stopped. You know, you can never ask for a better ally. And even then, from time to time, we either let like when Obama didn't veto that UN Security Council resolution, or we do things. I mean, not not that do not make us look as Israel's best friends.
yeah.
And this is Israel, by the way. I'm just giving Israel as an example here. So if you are Wali Jumblat, the leader of the Druze in Mount Lebanon, and in 2005, Wali Jumblat stuck his neck out because Bush said we are spreading democracy. So Wali Jumblat said, okay, I'll take it. We have to get rid of Assad. We have to disarm Hezbollah. I'm with you. And he gave an interview to David Ignatius in the Washington Post. He said what we are seeing now is the equivalent of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And Jumblat became our best friend, America's best friend. We invited him like several times. And with Jumblat came the Prime Minister Hariri, the son of the one who was killed. And these were our guys in Lebanon. And we supported them in everything. And suddenly in 2008, Hezbollah decided to sweep these guys, just beat them.
Mm,
They sent the militia after them. And these guys started begging us. They said, they're going to kill us. What shall we
mm,
do? And what we did at the time, we said de-escalation, patience, talk to each other, love each other, form a unity cabinet, which was a huge retraction from where we were standing only a few years prior. So since then, Walid Jumblat has not been America's friend or partner since 2005. And he often bashes the United States and Israel. And even this is politics to him. These small tribes hedge, and they want to hedge on a strong and reliable partner. And we did the exact same thing with the Kurds yesterday. And before that, they were the Sahwat. Remember the Sunni force, the tribal force in Iraq? We supported them, and they helped us eject Al-Qaeda from Iraq. And the minute they were done, we handed them over to Maliki and the Shia government, the pro-Iran Shia government. And the pro-Iran Shia government beat them. And this is how the rebound was ISIS. You know, ISIS is the rebound of Sahwat. So we keep doing this time and again, time and again. We bet on the wrong guy. We let down our partners, and we think that what we have is the best policy. Every time we do this, we think, now we see clearly. No, we're not seeing clearly. We're abandoning our best allies, who are the Kurds. We're relying on Al-Qaeda, which will definitely turn against us. You know, the Lebanese president, by the way, the current Lebanese president, Joseph Aoun, we're
Mm,
asking him to rely on us, on our support, so that
mm,
we and disarm Hezbollah. Now, Joseph Aoun is thinking, if I go against Hezbollah, stick my neck out. And then America changes its mind, like it did with Jumlat or with the Kurds. I'll be stuck with animosity and no one will come to my rescue. So back to the word that I was saying, consistency. We are inconsistent in our foreign policy. In Lebanon alone, by the way, since the Trump administration started, we deployed Morgan Ortagus as our envoy to Lebanon. We had an ambassador over there. We pulled out the ambassador. We sent a new ambassador, Michel Isa. We pulled out Morgan Ortagus. We deployed Tom Barrack as the envoy. Now Tom Barrack is out. Now the only person in charge is Michel Aisha. This is only in 1 year we had 4 people involved in making our policy to Lebanon, each one of them pushing in their direction. The
yes.
best one of them has been Morgan Ortagus, but I'm biased here. You know, I'm the guy who wants Hezbollah disarmed. But I'm just saying it can't work this way. You can't send 4 people to the president of Lebanon and say, disarm Hezbollah. We have to be consistent and show a steady hand and be reliable. So this is really
Right.
missing. And as long as it's
Absolutely.
missing, we'll get more of the same as we move forward. But instead of Iran being the axis of evil, now it'll be Al Qaeda axis of evil with Turkey, Qatar, and Shara.
Absolutely. Consistency is the key word here. Absolutely. So, with this, we are going to conclude. And actually, I mean, despite all the dark picture we portrayed here, there is also a lot of hope in some small cracks in this picture. And we believe that the change will definitely happen. I mean, change is only constant. And your advice to the US administration, Hussein, I hope it will be taken on very serious levels because it's really what needs to be done in the Middle East. So once again, thank you so much for all the knowledge you've shared with us today, for giving us an insight into the real Middle East, not the Middle East we see in the news. We enjoyed the conversation very much. Thank you for the audience who participated today. We will be proceeding with these sessions in the next weeks, exactly at this time on Thursday, 9:30 Eastern Time, Washington time, and 4:30 Cairo time for those who are joining from the Middle East or from Arab countries. Thank you so much once again, and we look forward to more discussions to come. Thank you, Hussein. We enjoyed having you with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dalia. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.